welcome to another episode of our dive into the Grimm fairy tales. Today we will be diving into the Virgin Mary's Child, also known as Mary's Child. This fairy tale was collected by the Brothers Grimm and published first in their first edition of the Children's and Household Tales in the year 1812. Now, going through this, if you've already read The Fitcher's Bird, it's quite similar to that. It's also quite similar to the Italian The Goat-Faced Girl, published in 1634 in the first volume of the Pentamerone by Giambattista Basile, and the Norwegian The Lassie and Her Grandmother. Now, the Grimm source for this particular tale is credited to Gretchen Wild, who was the daughter of a family who lived across the street from them, and their families were very close, very entwined, and I think one of the brothers actually married one of the Wild daughters. But that will be in a video coming soon where I dive into the families more than the stories, which I'm really looking forward to doing because I'm nosy. Also noted are the similarities to Bluebeard, published in 1697 by Charles Perrault, and you'll find that religion often comes into play in fairy tales, whether it be by a little thing with the beliefs or the actual deities that come down and mess with people, which is not unlike the Greek or Roman mythology with their gods coming down and really screwing people's lives over just for the pleasure of it because they're bored. Now, if you haven't got it from this opening, I am not religious. I believe in science and facts. If you can prove it, then it's true. So this is your warning card. If you are religious, particularly of the Christian religion bent, then this video might not be for you because I will be ripping the characters apart and probably just taking the piss. So if you are offended by taking the piss of religion, then click off this video. It is not for you. Go watch another one of mine. Don't leave me completely. But if you stay, then on your own head be it. If you're offended, I don't care. So this tale begins with a poor woodcutter, his wife, and their only daughter, their only child. And they lived on the edge of a forest, and when the child was born, they were especially worried how they were going to provide for her, because they had no money really to even feed themselves. And one day when the woodcutter went into the forest to cut wood, what else? A tall, beautiful woman suddenly appeared before him. She was wearing a crown of shining stars on her head, and she introduced herself to the woodcutter as the Virgin Mary, the mother of the Christ child. She said that since he was poor and needy, that he should bring his newly born daughter into the woods with him and give the child to her, and she would take the child away and provide for it. Now, it needs to be said, do not go into forests with your only child to just hand her over to suspicious women in woods, because nothing good can ever come of something like that. And the woodcutter obeyed, and he ran to go get his only child without telling his wife, and gave her to the woman in the woods, and who promptly took her up to heaven. Now, it's my belief that anyone entering heaven has to be dead. So if you read that into it, then this ghostly woman in the woods kills the baby and takes its soul to heaven to play with. Like she hasn't got enough. And that's where the woodcutter's story ends, because he's never mentioned again, nor him or his wife. If I was his wife, I'd have killed him. They're never mentioned again. They don't even come into it. They don't get to find out what happens to her. So to them, he's just killed their child. I mean, even being his wife, if you believe his story, you probably wouldn't, but you'd have him killed for murdering your daughter, wouldn't you? The guy is suspicious, let's face it. Probably ate a funny mushroom. Now, once the girl was in heaven, she never wanted for anything, because when you're dead, you don't need it. And she ate only cake, and she drank only the sweetest milk. Her clothes were made of gold, and she played with little angels all day. Sounds heavenly. Now one day when the girl was 14, the Virgin Mary came to her and said that she had to go on a long journey. And before she left, she called the girl over and she said to her that, I am entrusting you with this set of keys to the 13 doors of heaven. Like she hadn't got anyone else to entrust with the 13 keys. You know, like an actual angel, an actual resident, and not a 14-year-old teenager. Of these 13 keys, and she's allowed to open 12 doors and look at the marvels which lay behind them. However, the 13th one she's not allowed to open under any circumstances, and she even shows her which key it is that opens this 13th door that she's not allowed to open. Because nothing ever came of giving a teenager the keys to your house, going away for an undetermined snatch of time, and saying that they can't do something. What did she expect? And not only saying that she can't do something, but actually showing her what she can't do and how to do it, but telling her that she can't do it. This woman's judgment is not the best. Stealing a baby out of the woods, and then waiting 14 years till this girl was a teenager, giving her the keys to the palace, the house, whatever, and not expecting them to throw the most disruptive party imaginable. Now the maiden promised to obey her commands, and after the Virgin Mary left, she opened one of the 12 doors a day and looked on the marvels which lay behind them. In each of the rooms was an apostle who sat in dazzling light, and she had never seen such glory and splendour as she did looking beyond the doors of these 12 rooms, which she opened one per day. Which meant the Virgin Mary was gone for about 2 weeks, leaving a teenage girl in charge. Like there was no higher power that could, look after his own house. Now, after the 12 doors were opened, there was only the 13th door left. For a long, long time, the girl managed to resist her ever-heightening curiosity, and she refused to open this forbidden door. But that wouldn't be much of a story, so finally she was overcome with her curiosity and she unlocked the 13th door. Inside this 13th door, she saw the Holy Trinity sitting in fire and splendour, and she reached out to touch the flames just a little bit, and her finger turned golden from touching it. Quickly, she snatched it back, slammed the door shut and locked it again, hoping that nobody would ever find out, and she knew she shouldn't have gone in there. Now, a few days pass by and the Virgin Mary finally returns and asks for the keys back. She's been gone for weeks. What has she got to do? Stealing more babies from woods. Now, when the girl hands her the keys back, the Virgin Mary looks into her eyes and says, "Didn't you open the 13th door?" Now, the girl was scared and she answered no. Did what any teenager would do and answered no. Denied it completely. Deny. Never find out about it, you weren't there. Now Mary put her hand on her heart and she felt it pounding heavily, and she knew that the girl was lying. So once again she asked the question, and once again the girl said, "No, I didn't." Now when the Virgin Mary saw the girl's golden finger, she knew for certain that the maiden had disobeyed her. And she said to the girl, "You've disobeyed me on purpose, and now you're no longer worthy to stay in heaven." And at those words, the girl sank into a deep sleep. When she woke up, she was lying on the ground in front of a hollow tree, surrounded by thick bushes, and her mouth was locked shut, so she couldn't utter a single word. So this girl has been taken when she was a baby, all the way up to heaven, has spent 14 years up there, not knowing any different, not knowing any life on earth, not interacting with anybody apart from angels and celestial beings, and then she gets plonked down to earth and is expected to survive. Now tell me, is that the actions of a benevolent mother-type figure? Not particularly. But let's not forget, this same mother figure ended up pregnant by a celestial being and then caused the death of that child by believing in all this nonsense and was basically a cult mother. You can tell I'm not religious. And not only that, she plonks this girl down in a world she doesn't know, shuts her mouth, so she can't even talk to anybody, anything, or even herself. She can't do anything. She can't communicate. Now, luckily, the tree was hollow and it was somewhere where she could shelter in rain and wind and stormy weather. She used this hollow tree as somewhere where she could sleep because there literally was nowhere else. Now, there was only roots and berries around for her to eat, and that was all she ate. And when the winter came with the snow and the ice, the hollow tree was her only shelter. And before long, the clothes that she was wearing were in tatters and looked like rags, and they were falling off her because they were absolutely ruined. So before long, she was absolutely naked with only her hair as a cloak. This bitch is recreating the Garden of Eden. Now, one day when the girl was sitting in front of the tree, so she's still around 14, 15 time. There hasn't been that long a timeline to go on. So she's sitting in front of this tree, clothed only in her hair, and a king happens to wander by because he was out hunting and got lost. The amount of times that happens, kings really have no sense of direction, and not to mention the people that are supposed to be protecting him just allow them to wander off in the woods. So of course, he immediately asks her to accompany him to his castle. Now, because her mouth was, locked shut, she couldn't answer, but she nodded anyway. And she is so unprepared for this. If you think about it, she's known nothing but heaven and nice people, not even people, nice angels, the whole of her life before being deposited in this wood. And this first guy could have been anybody. But of course he was a king. So the king lifts her onto his horse and takes her back to his castle. And soon he falls in love with her and he makes her his wife. Because consent isn't a really verbal thing here. Now, after a year passes, the queen gives birth to a beautiful baby boy. And the kingdom is overjoyed because this is an heir. Boys are more valuable than girls in royalty, or used to be in royalty. Now, that night, the Virgin Mary appeared to her and said that she would give her back the power of speech if she would admit that she unlocked this forbidden door. But if the queen was stubborn and didn't confess, then she would take her baby away with her. She's got a really bad track record with babies. Now, the queen remained defiant and denied that she had opened the door. I mean, she is only 16, for God's sake. And the Virgin Mary, in all her benevolence and love, takes her baby and just leaves. Now, the next morning when the castle discovers that the baby is no longer there, having been left with the queen all night, and of course the queen couldn't explain his disappearance because she can't talk, a rumour begins circulating among the people that the queen is an ogress and has cannibalised her own child. These people, my God. Now, this dies down after a time, and after another year passes, the queen gives birth again to another beautiful baby boy. And once more, the Virgin Mary appears to her and said for her to admit opening this 13th forbidden door, or she would take her child. Again. The queen again refused, and Mary took the child. So now she's got two of them. This is insane. Now, the next morning, when again that there is no baby after being left with the queen all night, the king's councillors started saying openly that the queen must be an ogress. How they just jumped to that conclusion, but we'll go with it. And they demanded the king that the queen has to be executed for her godless heathen deeds of eating her own children, with no proof. However, the king defended his wife and refused to believe all their rumour mongering. Now, bear in mind, he has two children now that have now disappeared. He must be thinking that there's something odd going on, but kings in fairy tales they're either really, really violent and smart, or they're really, really dumb. And this one seems to be just doesn't seem bothered. Now, in their third year of marriage, so the queen would be about 17, 18 years old, still a teenager really, the queen gives birth again, but this time to a beautiful baby girl. Now, the Virgin Mary appears once again and first takes the queen back up to heaven. where she showed her two other children, her two boys, playing with a globe of the earth, because that's safe to do. Honestly, this woman's parenting skills are off the charts. Now, the Virgin Mary again asks the Queen to admit that she opened this forbidden door and to just stop lying. But the Queen wouldn't budge. So the Virgin Mary threw her back down to earth and took away her daughter too. So the kidnapping of 3 children is all because of a door. Now that this was the 3rd child that had gone, the king could no longer restrain the councillors or the people, who continued to claim that the Queen had to be an ogress because the children weren't there and they were all in her care. She must have eaten them. And since the Queen could still not speak, she could not defend herself. And they condemned her to be burnt alive in the local square, no less. Because it's fun for all the family. Everybody loves a barbecue, right? So let's just recap. So the Virgin Mary, this wonderful, benevolent mother figure of Christianity, first comes down to a poor man and takes his child, keeps the child in heaven for 14 years, gives the teenager the keys to heaven while she swans off, and shows her what she's not to open, because humans have a wonderful track record of not opening things that they've been shown how to open, that they shouldn't open, even in Christianity. That happens a lot. But not only has she done this, she's taken her voice, so she can't talk, chucked her in the woods to, sink or swim. She lets a guy just rock up and take this naked teenager back to his castle and marries her, all the while this teenager can't talk at all. Then when this teenager gives birth, not once, not twice, but 3 times, each time because she's so pissed about it all being open that she gave the teenager the keys to, she takes her children and allows the people around this child to come out that she's some sort of mythical ogress that has cannibalised her own children. And not only that, not one note does she raise in her defence, and now this teenager is going to be burnt alive in front of the populace. So we come to a few days later. The Queen is stood on a pyre and tied to a stake. And as the fire started to burn all around her feet, her heart was moved. And she thought to herself that before she died, she would like to confess to the Virgin Mary that she had indeed opened this forbidden door. That she had indeed opened this forbidden door in heaven, and she had been so wicked, denying it the whole time. Now, just as the Queen was thinking this, the doors to heaven opened in front of everybody, and the Virgin Mary descended with the 2 little boys at either side of her and the girl in her arms. The fire that was still going on while this woman was descending from heaven, she finally puts it out, just as it starts to burn the Queen's skin, I might add. And the Virgin Mary steps forward to the Queen and said that, and since she finally wanted to speak her truth and be forgiven, then she was. Then she handed the Queen back her children without a word of explanation to anybody watching, and unsealed her mouth so that she could speak from now on, and bestowed lifelong happiness on her for the rest of her life, after giving her a traumatic 3 years. And one thing I thought about when she unsealed her mouth, this king that she's married to has never heard her voice. What if he hates her? And not only that, they were all prepared to burn her alive for being an ogress with no proof. And the fact that now she could be proven as a witch doesn't even come into play But that is the end of our tale for today. So if you like this tale, please leave me a comment and a like. And don't forget to subscribe because it makes me feel heavenly. As always, keep reading.